Hi guys, welcome back. Today in this video is going to be a little different. I'm going to go over some of the books that I read this year. I've been reading a lot more than I had in the past few years, but I've recently been reading a lot more. I have different videos of my blogs just talking about the books that I read and what I like about them and stuff, but I thought that I would sit down and kind of go more in depth in all these videos. So far this year, 2024, I've read 12 books and I'm currently reading another one. So I know that it's not like a lot and it's not crazy for all the book talkers out there or people that make YouTube videos about books, but for me it's a lot more than I've done in a little while. I'm happy for it and I'm excited to make this video. So the first book that I read this year, and actually I don't think it counts as this year, but I started it in December of last year and I finished it on January 4th. So technically it is this year's. This is the only book that I physically have. I don't like buying books. I think I read through them really fast and I'm never gonna read them again, to be honest. So unless it's a book that I really like, I go ahead and buy it so that whenever I want to read it again, I will. But for the most part, I just go to the library, like the local library, and I just get the books and I return them. But for Dune, since it's such a classic, I actually ended up buying 3 of the books. This is the 3rd book. This is Children of Dune. I did not love it. I had just finished reading the past 2 books of this collection. Nothing tops the first book for Dune. I loved Dune 1. This book I gave it a 3.9. I liked it. I actually ended up enjoying this 3rd book more than the 2nd out of all the series because it was a little bit more interesting to know about the children and to know about their powers and to learn more about Paul Atreides as well. It just wasn't my favorite. I think I would just stay with the first book and call it. Like, I just don't think it was that interesting. So this actually ended up being the last book that I read of the collection or the series of Dune, because after finishing this book, I was pretty much in a reading slump because it was just a lot. I read the 3 books back to back and like I just hit a slump and I couldn't read after a few weeks. After reading Dune, I ended up going a different route and I started reading a lot of books that were something that I used to read more before. I used to love reading romance books back in like middle school and high school, and after high school I just didn't read a single romance book. I refused to. It made my ideas of love just go completely wrong. So this was the first time that I got a book that was romance in years. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. So these are 2 authors. They are, I believe they're friends. I don't know what they are, but they're 2 as a dual author. And I love this book. I finished it in a week. I was brought back to reading so fast after reading that book because it was so easy to read. It was very cute. It made me cry and it made me laugh. And I thought that it was actually really nice. It wasn't cringy. Like, some of the things about romance books is that they can easily go into a cringy mode, and I don't think this did that at all. So I actually ended up enjoying it a lot. I give it a 4 out of 5. The only reason I didn't give it a 5 was because it was a little childish and it was a little repetitive at the end, but overall, great book. This book was the one that made me go back to want to read more romance books, and you'll see that throughout this whole year. I've been going back to romance a lot, and it's because of this book. The next book that I read is Twisted Games by Anna Hong. The book is the 2nd book of the Twisted series, and I loved it. Just different for me. I've never read a book like this, and if you know, you know, but it's very spicy, as they call it. It has a lot of sex. It has a lot of words that I personally haven't seen in books. So to read it was different, and I think that's what I liked. But when I finished it, it just wasn't something that stuck with me. I didn't want to continue with the series. I didn't want to go back and read books like that, to be honest. It was a little unrealistic to me. It was a little cringy as well, but I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. So I didn't hate it. I enjoyed reading through it. It just wasn't, I don't know, it's not something that I truly enjoy reading. The next book that I read, and I'm really excited about this one, it was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I've been wanting to read this book forever. It has been my favorite book of the year. I give it a 5 out of 5. It was so beautiful. It was so easy to read. The characters, you get to actually fall in love with both of them, with the story, with their background and their life, and you get to see more of their personalities more than just, oh, they like each other. And I definitely enjoyed it. I finished it in like 3 days, I think. I don't know, I think it was just a very cheesy but cute kind of book to read. It was very realistic and it felt more mature than all the other books. Next book that I read was The Coworker by Frida McFadden. It was the only one that I could get my hands on from this author that was at the library, and I ended up loving it. I haven't read thrillers in so long, and my absolute favorite book is Silent Patient. I read it in 2 days. It was so good, I couldn't put it down. There was a lot of different plot twists on this book, and a lot of people criticize it for it because it's like kind of expected. For me, it wasn't expected. I thought even to the last page, I was just like very shocked and very confused, which I love about thriller books, of course. So I definitely give it a 5 out of 5. Next, I read one of the worst books that I've read this year. It was The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. Actually, this shouldn't be in this section because we're in this video at all. I didn't finish this book. I DNF'd it. I couldn't finish it. It was just too cringy. It was just bad. It was very cringy, very like, they even had emojis on the book, which I personally don't like. They had screenshots of conversations with a text message thing, and it's like, it didn't feel like you were reading a book, which I didn't appreciate. Couldn't find a connection with the characters, which I think is very important when you read a book. You want to fall in love with at least one of the two people in a relationship, and in this book you just don't see them grow, and you don't see part of their lives. You just see them kind of walk into this weird relationship that just doesn't make sense to me. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. Didn't like this book. I love Christina Lauren, but this book just didn't do it for me. I actually gave it a 1 out of 5, which is the lowest rated book in my collection that I've read. I found it very slow. It was, for me, too long for no reason. It wasn't like that special. Like, I didn't fall for the characters either. No, I think a lot of people love it. Maybe you just need to give it another try. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood to read romance, because the last book that I tried to read, she was just kind of like, her only personality trait was that she was horny the whole time, and he wasn't really interested in her, but since she was horny, that would just kind of make it work. So I didn't like that. I did finish it, but I give it a 1 out of 10. Next book on my list is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Surley. I really liked it. It talks a lot about the relationship with your parents, and especially your mom, and how that affects you growing up, and how even though that person might be gone, you still take, you know, their advice and their life with you. And especially, like, I don't know, I thought it was very well written. Like the fact that it goes and talks about how your parents also have a life, and how they're also living life for the first time, and even though they're your parents, they can't stop living their life because of you. And I love that. I thought it was very sweet. It did make me cry. I give it a 4 out of 5. Next book that I read, Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. It was cringy to read. I actually ended up enjoying it, which made it really hard for me to admit. Even my boyfriend hated the cover. I hate the cover. Like, I hate it, like sitting down with this book open and it's just a animation of people kissing at the front. I just don't like it. But the book itself was okay. I didn't make it seem like since they were in chemistry and like whatever, like they were trying to make the characters be smart, but they were actually pretty dumb, and like the stuff that they were saying were very basic and it was common knowledge. But they would go a whole chapter talking about chemistry and science and things that like we all know about. that was, I think, unnecessary. Like, I get it, they're trying to prove the fact that they're teaching and they're studying these things, but it just didn't, I didn't need to read that. The main character herself, annoying. She was so annoying. I disliked her a lot. I can't remember their name, I think it's Jack. I liked him, but I hated her. I think she was so annoying. She was trying to be quirky all the time, and it just wasn't for me. I didn't finish it, but I gave it a 2 out of 5. The next book that I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina. I liked this book. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was just a very easy read. I'm pretty sure I read it in 2 days. It was, like, it's called like a beach read as well. It was just a very sweet kind of relationship that develops, and they fall in love with each other, and it's just very nice to see. Enemies to lovers relationship, but she was a little bit too hateful towards him. That was just like, okay, like, you need to drop this bit, you know, we know that you like him, so like, enough. But it was still a great book. It was very easy to read. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It doesn't draw me into reading more of the books. I know there's a second one coming. If it's not out yet, I'm not interested in reading it, to be honest. I think I'm good. Next book in my list is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this author. She has been one of my favorite authors forever. Well, maybe 2 years. Only personality trait was that she liked cinnamon rolls and she wore a bun the whole time. And it was like, okay, we get it. So long, maybe 20 times in the book, and it's like kind of just annoying. I did like the concept of the book of like, you have 2 endings and your life can change in a second, and one decision can lead you to 2 completely different endings, and I love that, and I thought it could be more. I just wish that the character had more personality, because it just, that was it. That's like the only thing I would change in this book. But One True Loves by the same author, beautiful. The book, beautiful. Everything it talks about, the characters were great. The love, the romance on it was beautiful. I think that this brought up so many things and so many questions for me of like what love really is and how you define love. I loved it. I definitely gave it a 5 out of 5. Next book that I read, and I just finished this one last week, is Self-Portrait with Nothing by Amy Pokwatka. It was really good. It was more of a sci-fi book, I think. It's really cool. It talks a lot about multiverse and so many, there could be so many versions of yourself out there, and how, again, compared to the last book that I just explained, like how one decision can change your whole life, and even though you wouldn't make that decision right now, maybe the other version of you would. And I thought the concept was amazing. I really liked this book. I didn't love it because it was very slow, and I didn't like the ending of it, but otherwise, like, the whole theme of it was really interesting, and I haven't read a book about that ever, so really liked it. I give it a 4 out of 5. The next and last book that I read this year is The Fine Print by Lauren Osher. I loved it. I think this is like my favorite romance book. If it's a romance book, I think it is. It has a little bit of everything. It's like enemies to lovers. It also has a lot of like fiction in it, I think, because of their life stories, and it is a bit spicy, but it's not overly spicy where it's like Twisted Games was too much. Like, it was like, okay, we get it, whatever, next page. This did it enough where it's like you fall in love with the relationship, and that is just extra, and I loved it. I thought the 2 main characters really developed in the whole story, and I think to see someone who is so powerful and so rich and is a billionaire and is actually humble and has a lot of traumas and, you know, can actually love, and it's difficult for that person to love, was very beautiful to read. So I cried, surprisingly, but I also just really enjoyed it. I already have the second book with me, which I showed in my last video, but obviously I gave it a 5 out of 5, and I loved it. that is it for all the books that I read this year so far. We are in the beginning of April, so I'm excited to come back in a few months and show what I read next. Right now, I have 3 books with me that I showed in my last video. I'm halfway through this one right now. It's Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Love this author. I think some of the things that I learned this year so far was, 1, you do not have to finish a book that you don't like. If you're not enjoying the book, it is completely okay to DNF it. I think I used to be this way too, where I just felt forced to finish it because I already had the book and I had already started it, and it felt like a failure to not finish it. But you can just start a book that you might actually love instead of holding on to that one that you don't like. So it is completely okay. It's just like watching a show or a movie. If you don't like it, you're gonna turn it off. So same thing, try to make it fun for you, try to make it enjoyable, because that's the whole point of reading. Also, it doesn't matter what you read. You don't need to be reading smart books all the time. You can read a silly little romance book every once in a while and you're still a reader. It doesn't matter. And then the last thing will be to just find books that you feel gravitated towards, even if it's just by the cover, and try to pick a book that might not be too popular, and just grab a book at the library or the bookstore that you haven't heard about, or you don't know anything about the author, because it is really fun to be with everybody and be reading the books that are popular that everybody has read. But I think it's also very fun to just have that one book that nobody knows about and you love it. So yeah, that is it for today's video. I will see you next time. Bye.